Hola, it's Joe Partivilla. This is the Forbes Books Podcast. And for 7 seasons, Kerry Washington starred as crisis management consultant Olivia Pope on the hit TV series Scandal. But what's it like to handle a crisis for real in 2022? My guest this week is Stephanie Craig. Stephanie is one of the country's top crisis and reputation strategists and is currently the vice president of consulting at Kith, where she helps clients expertly prepare for crises, mitigate risk, and rebuild reputations. Now, her backstory may not be as scandalous as Olivia's, but it sure is fascinating. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Joe. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
All right, so Stephanie, how do you define what a crisis is? Because it seems like such a very dramatic word. What would define a crisis to you?
Well, it really is something that is very much in a perspective of whoever it is happening to. For us, we work with a lot of really just big organizations and companies. There's just pretty much a universal understanding of what a crisis looks like. It's something that sets you off your game. It makes you deviate from your plans. It can be everything from a public relations crisis to investor crisis and investigations, both criminal, civil, government. What form it takes is usually unique to who it's happening to, but we define it as an event that knocks you off your game, something that knocks you off the pathway that you have set forward. But we really believe in a strategy that says, okay, this can be prepared for. Do you know what's going to come in when? Not necessarily, but you can absolutely put the things in place to be ready when it does come and put the things in place to be able to see it sooner.
And you've said that no one is immune from crisis. And if you follow any kind of news or you're a business junkie, it's like no one is impervious to it. So if no one is impervious to crisis, how do you prepare yourself for a potential crisis?
Crisis doesn't have to be something that you do to cause it. I think that's an important thing to understand. It could be simply based on where your company is located. I think we're seeing a lot of companies being looked to for leadership on various social issues, in issues that they never expected to be able to comment on or even have to engage in. And so understanding the landscape in which you are and having a real understanding of where you need to go and who's important to you and what's important to them. I have a friend that her company is very specific. They literally have 6 customers. And those customers they will not expand those customers. They have 6 customers. And what is important to those 6 customers is important to them. And so when they think about what constitutes a crisis, it really turns out what is a crisis to their customers is a crisis to them. So understanding who is important to you and what is important to them. I think if you look at universities and colleges, understanding in their realm of who's important. Is it your trustees? Is it your parents? Is it your students? Is it your faculty? Really understanding who matters in your ecosystem is a really great place to start with. But also just evangelizing within an organization about what is the most important thing about crisis, and that is preparing for it. Knowing who's in your chain of command when you need to make decisions. We define it as 3 things: speed, clarity, and trust. Are you able to make decisions fast? Do you see what's coming at you, and are you able to identify it and understand it? Do you have clarity on what your company stands for, what you stand for? Do you have clarity on who your audience is and who needs to make decisions? Do you also trust your systems are going to work? All of these things can be tested, improved, and be ready. And it makes what could be a really bad day maybe just a really uncomfortable day.
And I want to dig into that first point about the speed, because I think there's probably a fine line to that, because you want to be fast, but don't want to be too fast where you don't think out all your options. So how do you define speed in terms of doing things quickly, but also well thought out? I know it's almost kind of like an oxymoron there that I just said, but how do you find that happy medium?
Well, that's the preparation. It really is. If you know what you stand for, let's think about all the political issues that companies are being asked to comment on. If you've thought through where you're willing to engage, if you're willing to engage, that is a decision that doesn't have to be made in the moment.
Mm.
The fewer decisions that you have to make in the moment makes you faster at being able to handle what's coming at you. And there are so many decisions that can be made at any point in time that impact your ability to be ready, that is what increases your speed. Make decisions about what you need to do before you need to make those decisions helps you be fast.
And as the non-expert in this conversation, I feel like companies that drag their feet to respond to a crisis, those are the crises that last longer. I feel like instead of just getting it over with, it just drags on. I'm just thinking of like examples that pop into my head and Disney's actions with the "Don't Say Gay" bill and such. But they got dragged through the mud for taking so long to react to something like that. So in terms of that, do you feel like the companies that take too long, those are the ones that suffer the most?
Well, I think that there's a window for responding,
Mm.
and that everything moves so much faster. If you talk to people that are legends in the business, crisis used to move so much more slowly.
Mm.
But one tweet can ignite a fire. As an organization that is looking to respond, you have to understand who is going to be reacting to what you're putting out and where they live and how fast they're going to be engaged. So that is really part of it. And I think that if you let other people make the comments and define your position before you do, that's a really bad spot to be in.
And when you hear about folks in the crisis game, they always talk about controlling the narrative. Is
Mhm.
it possible to to control it? Because, like you mentioned, the fact that we're moving so fast and people are getting their information from so many different places, how does one control the narrative?
Well, it's for a lot of people, it has to be sticking to your values. Their companies more and more are living with a value set and knowing where you stand and making sure that it's not just controlling the narrative as soon as something breaks. The people, your customers, the people that matter most to you in your ecosystem, they need to know who you are before a crisis breaks. It's too late to build a brand, build a reputation the day you start having a crisis landing on your doorstep. You should be talking to these people, reinforcing your brand. And something I talk about quite frequently is communications professionals need to have a seat at the decision making and strategy table. And the reason for that is because there is such a connection between goodwill, brand, and reputation. There are very few people besides the highest level in C suite who are charged with being the protectors of a brand, that if you don't have those kinds of considerations on a day-to-day basis, you get into a crisis and you're already too late to try and build that goodwill.
And you know, it's funny. You're almost describing it as you're trying to help brands become bulletproof to crisis. And when I mean bulletproof, people always seem like bulletproof. Oh, that means you can't die. No, if someone gets shot with a Kevlar vest, it still hurts. But in a way, the hurt will not last so that long if they've built up this sort of armor around themselves. Is that a decent metaphor there?
Absolutely. I also like to think about it as insurance.
Mm.
If you look at just different news outlets, specifically business outlets, reputation is now considered a part of a company's value. There are various estimates. It goes between 30 and as much as 50% of a company's value is their reputation. And that to me is something that you would want to ensure. It's something you want to invest in protecting. And in the metaphor you just used, it's something you want to put a bulletproof vest on.
And your work at Kith, I mean, you work with companies before the blank hits the fan, right? I mean, obviously you take them on if something
Absolutely.
happens, but a big part of it
Yes,
is starting before anything even goes wrong, correct?
absolutely.
And how does that call go? Like, whether it's them calling you calling them, is it something like, "Hey, we want to be prepared for like the end of the world"? Like, what are those early conversations like?
Well, we're not helping them buy canned goods and building bunkers. We are, the calls are just really forward looking people. And we're tasked as a company to really look forward to what could happen. As much as we are asking people to evangelize within their own company that the way to go about preparing for crisis is to prepare for it,
Mhm.
we're evangelizing that as well. We really talk with people in our world about the need to prepare. there are a lot of people that do different variations of crisis. We look at crisis as a 360. We get in, we look at diagnosing what is kind of happening within your company as far as do you have strong lines of command on who talks to who approves things, that sort of thing. And when you talk with people in that space of being able to prepare for a really bad day beforehand, that's a really great conversation to have.
Hmm. I'm curious about your career trajectory because
Mhm.
do you go to school for crisis management? I mean, how does someone get into something like this? Or I mean, obviously, specifically you. How did this happen for
Mhm.
you?
I come from a long line of people that run towards fire. I run towards proverbial fire. So it has always been my happy place to be in the middle of chaos and crisis. Uh, the first part of my life, I merged two things that are important to me, which is being in the middle of chaos and crisis and advocating for issues that I care about by being in politics. It was a great learning environment to handle all sorts of crisis. It's not just always reputational crisis. Sometimes you have to be handling things that are really important to people. And I think that's the number one thing to understand when in what we do with Kith. It's about the people that we're working with because crisis may be happening to an organization, but it's real people with their reputations on the line as well and their stress. And I think politics really prepared me for being able to understand and work with people in a very high paced, high pressure environment and understand them really quickly. And I think probably also growing up moving a lot, that also really helped because I haven't experienced anything quite as scary as walking into ninth grade by myself in a new town. So I don't think anything else kind of is as scary as that day.
So you've worked with a lot of amazing people, first ladies, senators,
Mhm.
congress people, and obviously C-suiters as you're doing with your day job now. Is there one common sort of DNA trait, soft skill, personality trait that they all have in common that made them either resistant to crisis or maybe more stronger in the face of crisis? Was there one little thing that has been a common theme in your life?
Quite honestly, no. It's been fascinating to look back and think through all the different people I've had the chance to work with and in some pretty tough situations. Everybody kind of reacts differently. And some people have become more used to it and others haven't. It's very much, I think, rooted in who they are. And like I said about an organization and what matters to them. If you are, for most of these folks, if you are convicted in what you believe, if someone comes at you for it, you're okay with that.
Hmm. In terms of the work you're doing now, I'm wondering what is crisis management work pre 2020 when you had a pandemic and social unrest, and now is it sort of the same, or is there a heightened sense on being aware of a potential crisis? What's it been like for you over the last 2 years?
Well, I started with Kith in August. So just as we were this past August, so just as we were coming out of the majority of the pandemic. So I think I look at it more from my previous company
Hmm.
where I was the CEO and I worked with one client for 4 years and two and a half of it was during the pandemic. So some of the people that I spoke to every day, I met once. And I think that from a crisis perspective, creating trust with the people you're working with really fast is important. And not being able to see folks face to face is very much, I shouldn't say is, it was very much a challenge. I think we've all adapted to be able to create connections and create trust and create community in a way that is less physically connected because we had to. And I actually think that it's given us another skill. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoy a good face-to-face meeting, but I think that it's given us a lot of skills to be able to handle things without being in the same room, which from a crisis perspective makes us faster.
Hmm. Is it trickier now with the fact that, you're more likely to have a Zoom meeting with someone than actually meet them face to face? Or like you said, you've gotten now used to that? Because I feel like your profession was very much, getting your hands dirty in the weeds, side by side with either the client or the person you're working with. Is it just now just it's the same but different kind of way?
Yeah, but like I just said, I think that it is we've all adapted to it. And so you're not for heaven's sakes, my dad uses Zoom and he still doesn't even understand his iPhone. So I think that there is beyond him, there's a real understanding of on both sides of an equation how to quickly create trust and connectivity. Whereas if 3 years ago that wasn't there. So for us, if we're not working on the preparedness side of the equation,
Mhm.
then it gives us this new environment gives us a chance to get involved quicker. So it's easier to email a Zoom link than it is to jump on a plane and head to Ohio. And you can get so much more done in the time that it takes to get on the ground. So I actually think it's made response advising faster because we can get to you faster.
Hmm. And with Kith now, I'm wondering, how does that relationship work? Because I'm just trying. Is it sort of like a PR retainer type situation with these companies, where you're sort of on at your beck and call, almost like an attorney as well, that's there every step of the way to not only get them through the crisis but prepare them for the next one? Is how does that dynamic work with you and your clients?
Every engagement is different for us. We've had some clients we've been working for 5+ years. We have some clients that come in, come and go. We really believe in creating a community. So we take every opportunity to, even if someone's not working with us on a regular basis, we like to make sure that they still feel part of our community. And this is my way of describing it, not Bill's, our CEO. We like to make our friends clients and our clients friends. So if they know they can call us and they can call us and engage us on in a heartbeat. And we really believe that the way we conduct ourselves is our calling card. We make sure that we come with the highest level of skill, that we are very, very discreet, that we know exactly what we're doing, but that we do it with a sense of kindness and professionality. It doesn't matter if if we walk away or if we continue a relationship. We want to make sure that our clients just they feel like they've gotten the very best of us at all times. So the types of engagements we have are very, very different, but the outcome we like to always have be the same.
Mhm. And what are some of the more common crises you're dealing with these days when it comes to these brands and companies? I feel like the first one I always see about is the cyber crimes. Whether companies are getting hacked. Is that one of the common ones you're seeing? What are just to give folks an overview on the kind of projects you work on?
Well, we work on anything that sets somebody off balance. So yes, you're exactly right. There are a lot of cyber crisis, and they take on varying forms. So my fact that I worked in the tech policy industry for over a decade really comes into play a lot, and so that's probably one of the number ones we have. But there are also industrial issues and there are brand issues that come from things that are outside organizations control, like if a state legislature makes a law that is contrary to to a company's customers or their employees and the company's headquartered there, that's a crisis.
Hmm.
So I think that it's crisis change based on the environment. So of course we're all so technologically dependent in so many ways to do business, to communicate with people, that is really an important one. But crisis can be what, like I said earlier, whatever knocks you off your strategy, and they take all sorts of different colors.
I want to pick your brain about the tech side of things because when I talk to folks in
Mhm.
the cybersecurity world, they talk about one of the biggest problems being that most companies don't even talk about when they're hacked. You may hear about it like years down the line. I'm wondering, when during your time in tech, Did you see a lot of that? And how do you feel like the best way to manage that in terms of, announcing or letting people know that there was some sort of cyber attack involved with the company?
I don't think I can make a blanket statement about that because it all depends on what kind of company it is,
Hmm.
and what they're dealing with. When you have certain cyber breaches, it is critically important because customers are impacted. And it depends. This is why speed is important a lot of the time. And I also think that there are times where you need to really make sure where the technical people, where their expertise is
Hmm.
and what their direction is. So a lot of where we work is the intersection of all of these different organizations within a company who all have different priorities and all have different timelines and different levels of acceptance for public disclosure. So understanding how everybody factors into a situation like that, I think is the most important part of a cyber response. I think communications is always inclined to be talking
Hmm.
about something, but if there are technical considerations that need to be prioritized, that's going to be unique to your company. And this is exactly, you've just put a fine point on what I said. You need to figure out beforehand. Nobody, I don't think there's anybody that's coming up with right now today a new type of cyber attack or new type of cyber crime. So you can plan, you can practice, you can work out those kinks. So if you want to if you want to talk early, and if you want to talk early, you can be prepared to talk early.
And lastly, on a personal note, are your professional skills transferable to your personal life? And I ask that in that since your friends know that you handle crises for a living, are you the go-to for folks who have crises in their life, or maybe when you have your own personal crisis, are you more prepared to handle it than others?
Well, I would have said that up until 3 years ago. So yes, my friends, when I am a problem solver. That's from when I was a little kid till right today. I am a problem solver. About 3 years ago, I became a step parent to a now 16-year-old. And so I'm handling new types of crisis every day that I never anticipated. And so it very much comes to play in my life. And I think it's fascinating because my stepdaughter she calls me weird almost every other day because I don't react to the same things that I think other parents react to, including her dad. Um, and I think when you understand that there's so many worse things that can happen,
Hmm.
it gives you a lot of perspective. So I am remarkably calm.
Hmm.
And that surprises most people that I am a remarkably calm person. And I think that when you do what I do for a living, when you do what we do at Kith, you are very circumspect in how things work and you understand what needs to happen when and how. And so I think translating that into your personal life is a good thing. But I also think at the same time, it's very unnerving for a 16-year-old who's trying to get a rise out of you.
I will say, just talking to you for 30 minutes, Stephanie, is that I feel like your self awareness skills must be off the charts. Is that something that you're very well aware that you are self aware, very self aware?
Yes, yes. But I would say that that probably comes from 15 years of being a competitive figure skater. You when you have to be very self-aware because if you can just imagine being 11 years old and standing in the middle of a sheet of ice all by yourself waiting for the music to start, you better know where everything is, how you're smiling, how you're reacting. And I think that it is very much something that you practice because people really tend to react emotionally. And it's a beautiful thing and it's a, scary thing sometimes in life. So it's very unnerving for people to not have me react and have me respond very, very quietly. I think that also probably comes from my dad was a trained hostage negotiator.
Oh yeah.
And when you are 15 years old and you've broken curfew and your dad says, "Well, Stephanie, I'm extremely disappointed in you," and doesn't yell at you, that's a moment where you're like, okay, there's a different way to approach life. And so being a teenager for me was a lot of negotiation, and I apply that now.
That's funny. I've written about this in my book that I'm putting out this year, and I talk about it all the time, is the fact that we're so bad at self-awareness, like as a society. No one, I use the perfect example of, like, you could be on the beach by yourself, and all of a sudden a family of 12 will put their umbrella 6 feet away from you. So why do you think we're so bad at self-awareness? I know this is not what you're prepared to talk about, but I'm curious, like, because I'm sure you see it all the time, but why do you think people are so bad when it comes to that?
Give me just a second to
Yeah.
think about this.
It's a
I
deep
think
question,
that there
Stephanie. I know. I'm
Yeah,
hitting you hard at the end here.
Well, no, it's funny because as soon as you asked the question, the first thing that came into my mind was the first day of ninth grade, as I mentioned before, and why I'm so self-aware. People like to go about their daily lives. They don't seem to see a lot of what's around them. And I think that sometimes that's a good thing, and I think sometimes that's a bad thing. And we having respect of one another, to me, is a really important thing. And I walk through life with treating people with respect regardless of their station. And I think that comes from, like I said, moving a lot. It also comes from politics,
Mm.
where I met people that were not like me and didn't grow up like, well, granted, I grew up in the Canadian North, so not a lot of people grew up like me.
Right.
Uh, but I met people that had very different backgrounds than I did, spoke different languages than I did, were different colors than I am. And getting out of your comfort zone and meeting people that are not like you makes you more highly tuned to other people in general. And I go back to, helping raise this 16-year-old kid, and that's the thing that I'm really trying to instill in her, which is get out there, see the world, meet the people, get out of your comfort zone. And there's a whole lot of really great things that come from that. And I think a lot of that is it's not necessarily self-awareness, it's awareness of other people.
Hmm.
And that comes from meeting people that aren't like you, and understanding that different people react differently to different things. It's difficult for us because of the last 3 years to really connect with people now. I think we have to get more used to being back in crowded grocery stores and saying excuse me, and looking around to see who's around you, and attending concerts or your kids' school play, and just realizing that you're not sitting in your pajama pants in front of a computer anymore.
Right. Well, I think it's safe to assume, Stephanie, if someone is out and about with Stephanie Craig and you freak out, there's a real problem. Otherwise, it's going to be okay. But if you start freaking out, then people are going to start freaking out. So keep being that calm voice to keep everyone settled. Okay, Stephanie?
Well, thanks, Joe. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
The pleasure is all mine. She is Stephanie Craig, the Vice President of Consulting at Kith. To find out more about her organization, go to kith.co. And that's it for another episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you take a quick second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I'd love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.